an addict, right? I think that's also very common. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the roller coaster that comes with that, that's too common.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of set the stage for that by giving a little glimpse into John's life
Mm-hmm.
uh, as a as an adolescent. I think he was maybe 8 years old when we picked up the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and some people hear that, Joanne, and they say 8 years old. There's no way that somebody that's 8 years old could be addicted to anything. How is that possible? It's like, well, it is possible, and it does happen, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Um, in the beginning of the book, we speak about his mom's addiction, right? His father was also an addict. And so there's just that cycle of addiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Both he and his brother ended up being addicts as well.
One of the things that I picked up on as we told the story, and friends, I am talking with author Jo Anne Mitchum. She co-authored this book, um, and one of the things that I picked up through reading the book, Joanne, was that it's very, very easy, and maybe without the spouse that's not in the bondage of addiction, knowing it, but it's very easy to become codependent in this relationship, and you see that a lot, probably, don't you?
Very, very much. Yes. Yes. I couldn't put an exact number on it, but I don't want to say 100% of the time, but I see it very often. And the way that I would describe codependence is caretaking in a way that is trying to control the outcome. So it's not so much a supportive way, right? It's not so much being there in support of, but trying to control it. So
Now, trying to control it, Joanne, is that because I mean, you mentioned because they want to see a particular outcome, um, which is quite natural.
mhm,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
That would be the case with anybody, I would think.
Right. Right.
Um,
To remain safe.
yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
And is that tie? Is there a relationship in any way between um, codependency and holding on to hope, trying to be hopeful in this situation? Do you think there's any relationship there?
I do. It's not straightforward. Like I can't say, well, this is hope and this is codependence. Again, it's more about having control or trying to have control of the situation when we really can only just control ourselves.
Yes.
I know Michelle in the book gets to the point where she knows she doesn't have it within her to continue to try to keep her husband afloat. She just doesn't have the capacity anymore. She's taking care of her kids. She's trying to um, uh, maintain control for the kids, and she turns it over to God and says, "God, I need your help. John needs your help." That she couldn't do it anymore, and that's where hope comes in, right?
Yeah.
Um, Looking to God for hope in this case,
Yes.
and it's the hope that helps people step beyond what their current reality is and to be able to envision something else.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. That certainly makes sense. It also became quite clear that addicts in a good many situations have a could we say a narcissistic bent.
sure.
I don't want to say they're full-blown narcissists, but in a
Right.
sense they lean heavily in that direction. Is that a fair assessment?
It is. Um, so narcissists, when you think about a narcissist, they're, we talked about controlling. They can be very controlling. They have a hard time empathizing with anyone else. They want to be, thought well of. They want to be admired. That describes a lot of people. But when you add to that, maybe a change in the way they keep themselves up, maybe a change in hygiene, or maybe they're suddenly irritable all the time, or there's an insatiable need for money, bloodshot eyes, changes in personality, or how much they're motivated to do things, or now there's a lack of motivation. When you see those types of things coupled with what you would think of as narcissistic tendencies, that's when, you might have an issue that you want to look into. That's when you want to really pay attention.
Yes. And how much of the one that's in the bondage of addiction and demonstrating these narcissistic tendencies and traits, have they cut themselves off completely from reality because their sole motivation and desire is to satisfy what their flesh is telling them they need, or is there any degree of?
I was going to say there are different degrees of that.
Okay.
So, at the lowest point, yes, that can be the case, but it doesn't have to be that far down the road. And in the book, you can see, well, there's maybe a second book coming out that has even more information, but there is a path that one can follow. And, in the very beginning of that path, folks can be very functional. If you think about alcohol addiction, right? There are what people call functioning alcoholics. They can get up and go to work every day. And John was the same way in the beginning. He was able to go to work. He had a huge, successful business. But as the addiction continued to take over his life, he lost all that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is devastating for a family to go through that, and really be sense that you're helpless to do anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And as it was happening, John didn't realize that he was losing his business. He had lost touch. So definitely, that does happen.
That does happen. Absolutely. So statistics say that addiction has been steadily rising as a reason cited for divorces in America today. You talk about a lot of the interpersonal the conversations, what was going through Michelle, and again, I applaud Michelle for being very, very frank about her life and everything that she was going through. And but those that are in the bondage of addiction, as you've pointed out, they kind of lose sight of the fact that their behavior is having a very severe, drastic impact on those that they love. And I don't deny that addicts love their spouses. They love their children. But the fact that they've been deceived, I think, prevents them from seeing the harm that's being done. Is that an accurate?
Yeah, I think you could look at it like the addiction is almost like a third party in the relationship. And it's the addiction that's driving the behaviors of the addict. Okay, so yes, absolutely. The spouse loves the supporting partner, but is just being driven by this addiction that's saying you have to get your next high. It's kind of that's survival for them.
I mentioned a lot of statistics, and well, statistics are only as good as the organization that's doing the survey and who's paying for the survey. But in this instance, recent statistics show that more than 14 million people in America are are dependent on and abuse alcohol. Now, I'm wondering from your perspective, Jo Anne, has that number increased in the last couple of years because of everything that's gone on in America, do you think?
Definitely, definitely. Mass General did a survey of adults in the U.S., and they actually found a 21% increase in excessive drinking during the pandemic.
Wow.
21%. And they extrapolated that data, and they found that by 2023, there'll be 100 more deaths and 1,000 more cases of liver failure by 2023. By 2040, they're up to 8,000 more deaths, over 18,000 more cases of liver failure, and close to 1,000 cases of liver cancer.
Wow.
Okay? Now, we're talking about mental health, but this also impacts physical health. And now you're caring for someone with physical illness as well. So, I mean, it's a tremendous impact on an individual and on a relationship.
Yes.
That's 1 year. I don't even know if I said that's from 1 year of
Wow.
increased by 21%.
Wow. Well, I can tell by the comments that we're receiving in the chat that this is a subject that many have experienced personally, whether it was a parent or a sibling or even they themselves that has dealt with this. So thank you for joining us today, friends. And again, I am talking with author Jo Anne Mitchum. The book is Addicted to Hope. Anyone who loves somebody suffering from addiction should pick this book up. It's and by the way, the website, Kathy, I think I gave you the wrong website. Can you see it there, Jo Anne, the website? I think it is.
Jo Anne.
Yeah. So it's JOANNE Mitchum.com. And I apologize, Kathy. I gave that to you wrong. JOANNE Mitchum.com. Thank you, dear. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So you suggest that people living with an addict often suffer anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Well, let me rephrase that. You don't actually suggest, I think that was Michelle's story, that she suffered those things. And that, again, that's not unusual. This impacts a marriage, well, both in the short and long term. I was actually surprised to read how Michelle navigated all of that, and with small children to boot. Mm-hmm. She was a real trooper.
I think she was surprised too.
Yeah. Well, and by her own testimony, this is what I like so much about the book. Was by her own testimony, she knew that God was taking care of her and God was directing her and wasn't going to allow her to be destroyed. And of course, in that knowledge, she also knew she had some responsibility to set boundaries. Mm-hmm. How important is it, Jo Anne, for someone who is in a relationship with an addict to set boundaries and then stick to those boundaries?
So it's important for all of us to have healthy boundaries, whether we're in relationship with an addict or not. That's very important. But it's how a codependent changes, how a codependent heals from that type of relationship is by setting boundaries. That's one of the important steps, to set healthy boundaries. And like you said, to stick to them. And that's how you can move into that supportive role rather than trying to control the situation. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's key.
It is key. So you talk about the circle of addiction. What is that?
Well, in the beginning of the book, we talked about John's family, and both of his parents were addicts, and they both did become sober and were able to put that behind them, but it's always with them. And it stayed with John and his brother because they grew up with that. They learned the behaviors, the coping behaviors that their parents taught them. And then John got married, and he exhibited some of those unhealthy coping behaviors. And now his kids experienced that. Doesn't mean that they are addicts, but they learned some of those unhealthy behaviors just as well. And there's a good chance that they could get into unhealthy relationships.
Yes. Yeah. Kathy, do you see Kelly Jo's comment there? It affects children's decisions, who their future spouses.
Yeah. Yeah.
My sisters and I all married a version of the addict.
There you
That's
go.
exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Kelly. I appreciate that. David, thank you, dear. I was going to point out David. David is a very dear friend, and I know his story. He shared his testimony before. Both his mom and stepfather were both alcoholics, and now in David's case, his otherworldly sense of humor, which is consistent and contagious,
Mhm.
was a coping mechanism. That's his own testimony.
Mhm.
And so the Lord used that for good in David's life. I appreciate that testimony. Yeah, so Patty says that my dad was an alcoholic and mom was codependent. The children are the collateral
Mhm.
damage. Yeah, yeah. So true. Again, very, very important subject that we're talking about with Jo Anne Mitchum. The book is Addicted to Hope, friends. Addicted to Hope. Your story shows the legal, financial, emotional, and spiritual challenges related to addiction. I mean, you covered it all. Michelle didn't leave anything out. How do you counsel people as a licensed counselor, Jo Anne? How do you counsel people to remain hopeful, even when the impact of what's going on in their life is so dire?
Well, it's changed through the years. Traditionally, we didn't do couples therapy when an addict was actively struggling with addiction. But that has changed. And we found that couples therapy is actually an important component to the recovery, to the healing, because it's both partners are impacted by that addiction. It's not just the person struggling with the active addiction. It's both partners that need healing.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't just one thing, right? It's kind of a package. We work on communication. Communication's key.
Yes.
Conflict resolution. I want them to know that they're cared for and create a safe place that they can recreate in their own lives, right? That they're able to communicate in a safe way. Help them to see positives in their relationship again and to reconnect. Like I said, it's really, there isn't any one thing that brings about the hope, and of course, rebuilding trust. And that takes a while. That takes a little while.
Yes.
Because, even when things start to feel good, the partner is afraid to trust that.
Mm-hmm.
Feels good, but you can't rely on that because in the past it's been a cycle.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. You're reading my mind, dear. That is amazing. I was just going to say, grab Jamie's comment. And so John, in the book, Michelle's husband, John,
Mhm.
Teen Challenge, I believe, was the organization
Yeah.
that helped him. Yep, Kathy is a friend, and we know her testimony as well.
And John and his brother, they didn't go into foster care, but they went into a children's home for a short period, because the mother was in rehab and the father wasn't able, he was working and not able to take care of the kids like
Yes.
he'd want to. So, yeah.
Yeah. We're going to take questions from those that have joined us today here in just a couple of minutes. You also use a phrase, the insanity of addiction, the insanity of addiction. Could you explain what you mean by that phrase to our audience?
So what I mean with that is, very often we call doing the same thing and expecting something different insanity. When you do the same thing over and over and over and expect something else to happen. And that's what happens with addiction is the addict comes down, right, off the high, and they feel remorse and they say, oh, it's going to be different. Or they go for that next high and it's going to be different, and it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have remorse and they say again, well, this next time's going to be different. It's not going to be that way. I'm not going to be that way. And until their body craves, the next hit, the next high. And it's the same thing for the partner who, the addict is very sincere when they say that. They believe it. So the partner wants to believe it too. And that's the insanity. It really, professional help is important to help get off that hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So sometimes addicts are very good at manipulating, especially those with narcissistic tendencies, but they also many times they try to play the victim, act like they're the victim.
Mm-hmm.
And how difficult is it to break through that perspective and help them to understand that they're not the victim?
So, sometimes I will say sometimes, like the children we talked about, it's hard to say they're not victims. Okay. So as a child, they may be. And so that role may start that young. And we're all pretty good at whatever role we end up with in life, right? We learn to perfect it. Okay.
Yeah.
So the same thing for someone who views themselves as a victim. And the more things that go wrong, even if it's self-induced, helps to reinforce that role.
Yes. Yeah. Are there any questions from anyone on the platforms that you've joined us? Gatekeepers Online, YouTube, Facebook. Any question?
I'm not seeing any yet, Mike, but there are a lot of comments.
Okay. Yeah. So Kelly says, thank you, dear. Yeah, sometimes the addict can be blamed for all the problems. Only the addict is guilty. So how often in your experience, Jo Anne, do folks that are family or friends of addicts, that they actually admit that they contributed toward the individual going in that direction and becoming addicted? Does that happen in your experience where some people say, listen, I didn't treat them well. I didn't, I feel like I contributed toward that. And
so, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you go ahead.
So, again, we talked about the circle of addiction, and I would say that we are all responsible for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
In the way that we react to what life brings to us. So I don't know that the partner has a role in causing an addict, to become an addict. But it's almost like an unhealthy partnership. So it's something that they share. Okay. Rather than one person causes the other person to do it. They're both being unhealthy is like a perfect storm. And that's how I would phrase it. And I see some of these comments coming up and talking about Al-Anon, Alateen, and those are wonderful programs. They are.
Yep. Kathy talked about Alateen. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Amen. So, Kathy, that's a very timely comment there, because the book, Addicted to Hope, the book talks about that. Michelle and John both committed their lives to the Lord. John, during his stay at Teen Challenge, and it was very interesting to me, the even though removed from the environment that makes substance abuse so easy and available, being removed from that environment and being placed in a completely, totally different environment, it's apparent that addicts, after they've been removed from that environment where their substance of choice is so readily available, they still have to deal with the character traits that were like open doors to that addiction. And that came out in the book when John was going through the Teen Challenge program.
Yeah, it's the unhealthy coping skills. Definitely.
Yeah.
And so that's some of what we work on. I'm just reading some of the questions here. That's some of what we work on is the communication, because that's key, is getting in touch with emotions and being able to express themselves, right? Because alcohol or drugs can help numb whatever they're feeling inside. It numbs it so they don't have to deal with it.
Yeah. So Jamie has this comment here, Jo Anne, as you can see. Can you touch on the fact that a lot of addicts are used to mask childhood trauma? And sometimes the family doesn't even know about the trauma. And
that's where the numbing comes in. It's so that they don't have to process it and deal with it, because they don't know how to. Nobody chooses a life of addiction.
That's right.
They don't know another way.
Yeah. So Charlotte is asking, how does a parent help their grown child and or children see that there is a problem?
That's a tough one, because the child needs to know. It's the individual that needs to understand it's an issue. And there isn't an easy way to do that. What I would suggest, though, is those healthy boundaries and not enabling. So not making it okay or fixing whatever issues come up. I will tell you, my mom was at the hospital and I was going to visit her, and a mom came in and was talking to the security guard and was saying how she needed to get in to see her son, who was in the ER. He'd been brought in because he was drunk and disorderly. And he had an ankle cuff, or I don't know what you call it, and the battery was running low. And we're in the pandemic, and so they don't let people in, right, to see patients. But she was really upset, because if that ankle battery went off, then his parole officer, he was going to be arrested and had to go back to do some time. And she was upset. She was taking it on herself to make sure that didn't happen, but she couldn't see that her son needed to be responsible for that it was her son's actions that caused that. So she was enabling. And, that's an extreme example, right?
Yeah.
But as a parent, we want to help our child and not see them in pain. But if we keep them from that, they may not learn. to take on that responsibility and avoid it themselves.
Yes. Yeah. So Kelly says the children put the blame on themselves. So talking about her and her two siblings, one rebelled, one was the fix it, and one buried their head. 3 girls, 3 different ways of dealing.
Yeah, and that's the way it is. You can't say, oh, well, the child's going to be an addict, because that's not always the case. They may marry an addict, right? And you know what? It doesn't always have to be an addict. It could be somebody that's got maybe ADHD and maybe it's undiagnosed. And so they maybe procrastinate or we need caring, right? So it doesn't, or it's somebody with a disability. It doesn't have to be you marry an addict to be a codependent. You can get into an unhealthy relationship unless you break the cycle.
Yes.
And that usually takes professional help to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You're very welcome, Charlotte. Appreciate you joining us today. Kathy says, getting out of the environment and going into the children's home showed me that what we were living with wasn't normal. So thank you for that, Kathy. I imagine that after a while, to Kathy's point, after a while, children figure out a way to just cope with that. But do they think it's normal? I mean, do they get to a place where they think that's normal behavior?
Very often they do. And when I mentioned a few minutes ago that nobody chooses the life of an addict, it's what they know. It's what they're taught. And they're taught this is how you cope. This is how you survive. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they'll have a friend and they can go over to the friend's house and see, a different reality. But not every child has that.
Yeah.
Sometimes even TV. Sometimes on TV they'll see something different. But that's not always the case.
So Kelly says, yes, that was their normal.
Yeah.
That was their normal. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So Patty says, when I was about 11 years old, I became so embarrassed about my home life and did whatever I could. Yeah. That seems quite normal to me.
Mm-hmm.
That if that's your home life, you're going to keep that under wraps.
Right. Not invite anybody to the house. Yeah.
How tragic that is for children not to have friends that they can have to their home or go to the friend's home, just have what we would call a normal life. That really damages children, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or not want to do anything that would cause the parent to get involved. Right. Yeah. To avoid all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer to Sandra's question is she met me, Sandra. Sandra, just the reason I'm laughing, Jo Anne, is because Kathy is my wife and Sandra is Kathy's sister.
Oh, that's right. It was all Mike.
I'll get a copy. Yeah, I thought so. I'd get a comment out of Sandra on that. Well, so the book, again, friends, Addicted to Hope. There you go. Jo Anne Mitchum, Nancy Ducci. Tell me again.
D'Onofrio.
Nancy Ducci D'Onofrio co-authored it with Jo Anne. The website is joannemitchum.com, joannemitchum.com if you're interested in the book. So both Michelle and John came to saving faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. They dedicated their lives. They were serving him. Mm-hmm. And the Lord was using them tremendously. Mm-hmm. Even to the degree that Their marriage was being restored. The trust was being rebuilt. They were experiencing true family bonding, true family life. The Lord blessed John with being able to begin again in the business that he was brilliant at,
Mhm.
and built that business up. And then one tragic night, John let his guard down.
Mhm.
And my question, Jo Anne, is how easy is it for those that have been in the bondage of an addiction, freed from it, to not understand how easy it is to slip back into that? They don't intend to,
Mm-mm.
but they take one small step in that direction, and the next thing you know, the wheels fall off.
It's too easy. That's the short answer. It's too easy for that to happen. So John had issue with both drugs and with alcohol. Okay, it's not always the case, but in John's case, he used both. Now, what they're finding with alcohol addiction is, we've said for years that that's a lifelong addiction. But what they're finding is sometimes it really is maybe surrounding events. Maybe in 3 years would not be an issue. You could drink. But it's not easy to know. How do you know?
Right.
Right. So a lot of times alcoholics think, oh, well, I've kicked it. I can have a drink. I can control this one drink. But unfortunately, that's too often not the case. You can't go out to drink or after work to a bar and have a drink, or go to a buddy's house and have a drink. One of the ways that I look at it, I have celiac disease, and all I need is a crumb, just a crumb, and my body's reacting. It has nothing to do with intent. My body's off and running and reacting to that crumb, that little bit of gluten. It's the same thing for an addict, for an alcoholic.
Yes. Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's what happened. He didn't realize, right, that he was drinking too much.
Yeah. Yeah. Was involved in a very could have been much more tragic than what it was, but as it was, and I'm not going to give away the book, so you'll have to get the book yourselves, friends, to find out about Michelle and John's journey to wholeness and ministry and being useful to the Lord. But there was a speed bump in the road to what they're doing right now.
But it was the way that John handled that, the way that he reacted was so different.
Yes.
That's what was different there.
Yes, and that's, I imagine for Michelle, that gave her true hope. Because when somebody owns up and takes responsibility and says, hey, listen, I'm not going to try and run or hide from this. I'm not going to say, well, make excuses. I'm just going to walk in there and say, no, I'm guilty.
Right.
Yeah, that would bring great hope. So today, Michelle and John are serving the Lord, both of them ministries to women and men, and they're being used very powerfully. So my question is, in your experience, Jo Anne, how much of a factor does the Christian faith, surrendering yourself to the Lord Jesus Christ and walking out that faith, how much of an impact does that have on those that are addicted and their families?
It has a huge impact, tremendous, very positive impact. Being able to believe in something greater than oneself gives us hope. It gives us that hope that we need to lift ourselves up.
Amen.
And, in the book, it shows, how many times, not how many times, it was just constant. Michelle leaned on that relationship
Mhm.
with Christ
Yes. Yeah.
because she
Amen.
didn't have the strength to do it on her own. And when
Yep.
she couldn't trust her husband anymore in that relationship, that's where the trust was. She still had trust.
Mhm. Amen. Amen. Dr. Graves, my brother, thank you. Good to see you in here. Dr. Gideon Graves, God bless you too. Yeah, it's a story of redemption. It's a story of restoration. And I know Kelly and Kathy and others that have experienced that kind of an environment where a parent was an addict. And I know, Kelly and Kathy, that you are walking with the Lord today. You are walking in faith today, in spite of what your home life as a child was. So Johnny Lee says, my pastor's dad was very abusive to the family. It was his grandparents that helped. Yeah. Well, so there's another question, Jo Anne. How normal is it today for grandparents to take children out of that kind of environment and bring them into a stable, nurturing, loving environment and raise their grandchildren today?
Well, sometimes, like in John's case, the parents have had a chance to sober, right? To get into recovery.
Mhm.
And so they're in a better position to do that. But the child has still learned not the grandchild, but the child has learned those unhealthy coping skills and isn't there themselves yet.
Mm.
So I don't know how common it is. I don't have a statistic for that, but that is what makes that more possible.
Yes. Yeah. So I appreciate all these questions and these comments. This has been really good. This conversation, Jo Anne, shows me that this has struck a nerve. That this is much more widespread than what, we've recited statistics and things like that, but statistics don't really tell the personal story and the life lessons, because there are many things that we can learn from this, isn't there?
There absolutely, yes, there are.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to folks, Jo Anne, those that perhaps right now, most of the comments that have come in are related to having grown up in that environment?
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps there's somebody, they've joined us today, but they're not making any comments because they're in it right now. And this is a very painful subject, very painful conversation, because now they're reliving all of these things. And so what advice would you give to those who are currently in the situation?
Not just because I'm a therapist, but I would recommend talking to a professional, making sure you're safe. And that's, physically, emotionally, legally, financially, finding community, leaning on others, getting support. It's okay to ask for help, whether it's your religious community, your family, your friends. We talked about Al-Anon, reaching out and getting help is important. Taking care of yourself is important. That's, they talk about, like, when you get on the airplane, you put your mask on yourself before you help a child. Well, it's the same thing. In order to help anyone else, you need to first take care of yourself. And then we talked about boundaries, and I can't say that enough. Putting in place healthy boundaries and sticking to them, not No more enabling behaviors. I would say those are the things that you would want to do to change your life.
Yes. And if you have people in your family, people in your life that you know are loving and nurturing, that you know are walking with the Lord, that you know are stable in their emotions, and their life and their relationships, reach out to them. Reach out to them and ask for help. I think one of the things that your book brought out, Jo Anne, is that very few, I don't know what the percentage is, but very few of those that are going through these things, a spouse or a parent is an addict, very few of those people reach out for help. Why is that, do you think?
Very often they're embarrassed, or they don't, again, that's not normal for them, right? They haven't learned how to do that. They haven't seen success with that in their lives.
Okay. Well, any other questions or comments out there in the, so there's one from Kathy. Because of the situation, my sister Jody got married at 15 and I married the first time at 17. We both took custody of our younger siblings. Wow. Mm-hmm. So Kathy, if you don't mind saying, was that driven? And I know both of these ladies, wonderful Christian women. Kathy, was that as much to escape the home environment as anything else? If you're willing to answer that question, I'm just wondering. Yeah, and Kelly says you become great actors.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've probably
have a mask on. Yeah.
Yeah, you've probably seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Jo Anne, I sure appreciate the fact that you joined us today and shared your expertise and your experience, and thank you so much for writing the book. And Michelle did a great job telling the story, and I'm sure John contributed things as well. But thank you to Nancy as well for contributing to the book. Addicted to Hope, friends. The website is joannemitchum.com. Thank you, Kathy. joannemitchum.com. Reach out. And do you have a contact form on your website?
I do. And there is a link to my marriage and family therapy website as well that has more information.
Oh,
yeah. That's the author website that you have.
Okay. So there's the author website, joannemitchum.com. If you go out there, you have a few minutes, just drop a note in the contact form and let her know you saw her on the show and you appreciated what she had to say. So thank you so much. Okay. So Kathy answered, I don't want to leave without. So Kathy said, yes, it was even, though we both loved our husbands, but looking for an escape. And Kelly, same thing. All three of us girls married young. Yes, mostly for a way out. Wow. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, everyone that shared a comment and shared your personal testimony about your experience with this. It really means a lot. Thank you so much. And Jo Anne, thank you again for joining me today.
My pleasure.
God bless you. Well, that's all we've got today, friends. Thank you for sharing this show on your platforms and with others, maybe to encourage somebody that hasn't really revealed what they're going through, and that's life with an addict. Kathy and I appreciate all of you, and let me ask you to be in prayer for Kathy. Coming up on August the 11th, she's going to have surgery, and it's going to put her out of commission for, about 5 or 6 weeks. We're praying 1 or 2 maximum, but it's probably going to be more than that. But pray for safe surgery, successful surgery, and a quick healing for Kathy, and I know you will. We love you guys. Thank you for your support and your friendship. It means a lot to us. And we'll see you next time with another show. And I think next week we've got Pastor Casper McLeod will join us next week. So you won't want to miss that next Monday, the 25th at 6 p.m. Appreciate all of you. Love you. Remember, renewing our minds is not an option. See you then.